Hello, everyone. Hi, thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to give a couple moments to let folks filter in to the chat and just as I like to say, enjoy the slide here that we've prepared for you. Kind of get you in the spirit of the chat. Okay. All right. So my name is Jenna Quinn, and it is my pleasure as the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement to welcome you all to this edition of the 49er Industry Chat Series. And before we begin, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. We just want to let you all know that this is being recorded. And what that means for you is that this will be available on demand at our website at www.csulb.edu/alumni. And you can go ahead and view it at any time on demand. But for those of you who are here right now with us today, we encourage you to use the Q&A box to submit your questions for our guest speaker. You don't have to wait till the end of the chat. Just go ahead and send them right on in as they come to you, and our moderator will go ahead and relay those to our speaker. And so, speaking of our moderator, I'm very happy to introduce Melissa Evans. And you know what? I'm going to let her. She's our moderator today. I'll let her introduce herself. Melissa.
Hi, thanks for asking me to moderate. I'm excited to be here with my former boss, Michael Anastasi. My name is Melissa Evans, and I am a part-time lecturer at Cal State Long Beach. I've been a lecturer there for 7 years, and I'm also the editor of the Long Beach Post and the Long Beach Business Journal. And so I have kind of two jobs, but I've been in the news business for about 25 years, and have worked with a lot of very talented people, including Michael. So I'm looking forward to our chat.
All right. And I'll just go ahead and introduce myself, if that's all right.
Well, why don't let me read your bio first.
Okay, sure.
And then I think that's one of my duties. So Michael Anastasi is now the vice president and editor of the Tennessean in Nashville and region editor for USA Today Network in the South. He previously was senior vice president and executive editor of the Los Angeles News Group, and in 2015 led a team there to the Pulitzer Prize in local reporting. And I was actually there when that happened, so that was very exciting. He's a leader in diversity efforts in the journalism industry. He is a 2001 graduate of Cal State Long Beach. He also holds a master's degree in leadership and public service from Lipscomb University. Anastasi served as a juror for the Pulitzer Prizes in 2018 and 2019. And in 2021, he was named co-laureate of the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Journalism Award, which recognizes the best human rights and social justice reporting in the world. So, Michael, do you want to say welcome, introduce yourself and say any?
Yeah, well, I'm so happy to be here. So yeah, I'm talking to you today from downtown Nashville, Tennessee, thinking of Long Beach as the weather turns here in the south and it's suddenly become very cold outside. But I'm really happy to talk to you today, and especially to take any and all questions. I do these types of chats a lot, and I find that most people, they don't want to hear a speech. But they want to have real questions answered. So I'm looking forward to doing that this afternoon.
Why don't you start by just talking about your time at Cal State Long Beach and just kind of how that prepared you? You've had a long career in journalism. You were a journalism major at Cal State Long Beach?
That is correct. And I had a bit of an unusual path in that I originally started school at the University of California in Davis. I grew up in Northern California in farming country, and I went there to Davis to study international relations, and that's what I did. Um, and really had no inkling that I had a career in front of me as a journalist. But I always was I was a voracious consumer of news. And to me, that was just being, being informed about global events, about the world, which was my interest. I subscribed to Time magazine when I was 12 years old, and my parents thought I was weird. And only topped that a year later when I got a subscription to the Wall Street Journal. And but what I realized, and I'd read those daily along with a lot of other news publications, was that kind of through osmosis, I was learning how journalism worked, how news reporting worked, and what was the difference between quality journalism and not. And while I was at Davis, I was working a lot of odd jobs, as a lot of us have to do, to put my way through. And an old friend of mine told me that there was a part-time opening at my hometown newspaper for a reporter. And this friend knew that I wrote a lot and liked to write. And so I checked it out and thought, well, I could do this. And it's not in it. My primary motivation was it's not in the middle of the night, which all of the jobs I was doing, a lot of janitorial type of stuff, were all in the middle of the night, and it was really hard to go to school. So I did that, and took a liking to it right away. But moreover, the people who were the editors there were very encouraging and said, you are an unusual talent, and this is something you should really consider. And within a few months, they offered me a full-time job, and I was still in school. And I thought, well, I can do this job and go to school at the same time, which was kind of true, but not really. I could take like one class at a time if I were to fulfill my responsibilities. That's what I did, and I moved up pretty rapidly, and within just a couple of years, the Los Angeles Daily News called me and asked me to join the staff there. I still hadn't finished school, but that was something that I knew I had to do and was determined to do. And Long Beach was the place that I chose to do that. And they had an excellent reputation, and still do. And I was very attracted to it, and still am. I feel it's the most diverse university in the most diverse state. And that's been something that's always been very important to me. And so I continued working and advancing in my career while I was working at Long Beach. So a lot of the professors I had at that time, in some ways, were more peers than professors, but I learned from each and every one of them, and they were all very, very encouraging. And I also like the fact that, Long Beach had a lot of people who weren't conventional students, and a lot of people who were working their way through, who had to figure it out, many people who faced things that were much more difficult than I did. And that was very inspiring to me as well. So it was a combination of all of those things. And I think that that just helped make me a better overall, not only journalist, but person.
Yeah. I always tell my students, like, journalism is hard to teach. And you were doing it already when you were in college. Would you say that's true? I mean, you really have to do it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. In fact, over time, and I don't know how many students we have on this call, but the advice I give students today is journalism education is important, but it's very technically oriented. I really encourage you to study, have a strong liberal arts curriculum as a part of your studies. You need to understand how the world works. And you really need to be, I used to say you need to know a little bit about a lot. I think you need to know a lot about a lot today, and that's economics, business, political science, literature, government, world cultures, finance, all of those things. And that your opportunity to learn all those things is when you're at a university.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned too that you were an early reader. I think that is a skill and a trait that I can always tell my students who are readers. You
Yes.
have to be consuming.
Yeah. We, like you, I taught, I think we actually started the same semester.
We did.
Teaching at Long Beach, although that was my only semester because then I came to Long Beach. But I mean, it's very apparent, like on the first thing that students turn in, who's a reader and who's not.
It is.
And I work with another thing I'm really committed to is internships. I think it's internships are a really, really important, valuable way of developing a talent. So, it's not unusual for me to have, I think I had like 16 or 17 last summer. And
quite a few.
Yeah, it is. And we always hire interns that we think we can, hire somewhere in our organization. If not here in Nashville, usually not here in Nashville, actually, but somewhere else in the South. But the ones who are not well read, I'm not going to ever count anybody out, but it's a big uphill climb for them. They're usually not up to speed on current events. They just, it's just hard. It's just really hard. So being committed to reading, that habit of reading, certainly reading news and high quality news, but also, reading novels, reading nonfiction. I think that is really important. And as I've gone through my career, I've known lots of executives. I have yet to meet one for whom reading is not just a part of their day in, day out routine.
Yeah.
And the president of our company, this pretty remarkable woman named Maribel Wadsworth, reads like a book every 2 weeks. And I'm just like, I don't know how she does that with her job. I'm happy if I can polish one off every couple of months. I do read a lot of, reading all day, reading news. And I get several, I still get print editions delivered to my home as I'm online, day and night. But she's committed to not reading the news too, making sure that she's still learning about stuff. So that's something that I would urge everyone to learn how to make part of your routine.
Maybe talk about some of the changes that you've seen. And you and I I graduated from college in 1999. So you and I have been kind of in the same era. Maybe talk about some of the changes that you've seen from when you graduated, between then and what maybe students need to know today, or what kind of world they're graduating into today.
Yeah, I think that we can talk about that for a long time, actually. In our business specifically, we've seen an erosion of trust in the news. We've seen a politicization of society that is pervasive in really all aspects of life now. And we see people increasingly retreating into their camps, and being unwilling to take in information that doesn't jibe with their worldview, which I think is very dangerous. Howard Baker, who is a very famous senator from Tennessee, he passed away a few years ago, but was noted for his diplomacy, famously said that, the other guy might be right. And that it's always important to listen for a variety of reasons. And, in this environment, trying to continue to be indispensable to the communities we serve is a challenge that we didn't face in the same way 25 years ago. And that's one that term indispensable is one that I use constantly. The people who work under me are probably sick of me saying it, but I think it's the best word that I have found that really summarizes our mission, which is we must be indispensable. For us, that means we must be indispensable for people who live in Nashville, who live in Tennessee, and more broadly, the region. We're the largest news organization in the South, so we kind of have a broader role to play as well, in helping understand what's happening in a way that's understandable, trustworthy, and I think that's true no matter where you work. If you're working at the Long Beach Post, right? There's no reason for anyone to subscribe to the Post unless they find it indispensable, and that's hard. That's a hard thing to do day in and day out. And also indispensable means different things to different people. We have people who, being indispensable means that I'm telling them what's going on with the Tennessee Titans in a way that they can't get anywhere else. For other people, that's state government or the local political scene. For others, it's education, and just those three topics that I just mentioned: education, politics, sports. Right? As we've seen in the news in the last few months, all three of those things are passion topics that bring out the good and bad in people. So that's, I think, some of the challenges that we face. The transformation to digital journalism. Something that really bothers me is when people, journalists sometimes, talk as though the internet were invented a couple years ago. It was commercialized in 1996. I have journalists in this room, a couple of them who were not even alive then. Yet we still kind of talk about this newfangled thing that we're trying to figure out. That's we're not going to get to where we need to be unless we are leading in the digital space. And I think that we largely are, but that too is hard as we face the challenges posed by the tech giants who benefit from our content, but don't pay us any money.
Yeah, that's a big problem. And we could talk a lot about the financial side of journalism too, but I do have a question that sort of relates to what you were talking about in the beginning. It's a question about credibility. Does the field of journalism have a credibility problem? If so, what can be done? And in what time frame might it take to resolve?
So I'll start off answering that with a little story. About 3 or 4 years ago, I've kind of lost track of time with COVID. We were, and it happened to be the day, you may remember this story, when Nashville's mayor resigned and pleaded guilty to a felony as a consequence of an affair that she was having. It wasn't the affair that we cared about. We don't care about people's personal business. It was the fact that she was using government funds to facilitate and cover up her activities. And we broke that story, and that was a big thing for us. But on that same day, earlier that same day, the former captain of the Nashville Predators, our NHL team, had decided that he was going to come. He had retired at the end of the prior season, and he had decided that he wanted to come back to play for the team. That's pretty significant news for fans of that team. He was an icon in the town, and we were going to break that news, and I knew we were going to break that news at a certain time around lunchtime. And the sports guys were very excited, and they thought it was going to be the big news on the front page. But I also knew a little bit later we were going to break the other news. But anyway, I was in line and we broke the news of the Predators player, and push alert came out on everyone's phones, and the person in front of me said, "Holy smokes, look at this!" And the other guy was like, "That's BS." Right? He goes, who's reporting that?" And he said, "The Tennessean is reporting it." And then the other guy said, "Well, if the Tennessean is reporting it, then it must be true." And I cite that story not only to people I talk to like this, but also internally, because at the end of the day, that is all we have. And that is that we are true, not most of the time, not some of the time, not even 98% of the time, but all of the time.
Yep.
And that's an enormous responsibility. But that is, I think that is it's the burden, but it's also the privilege that we have as a legacy news organization. The Tennessean first published in 1907. I have the first edition here hanging on my wall. And, it's built that trust and that reputation literally over decades. In the civil rights era, the Tennessean also, at a time when many newspapers, if not most of them in the South, were mouthpieces for segregation and the status quo, the Tennessean was the opposite and was assigning reporters to cover the civil rights movement, not only in Nashville, but literally throughout the Southern United States. So it has that legacy as well, right? And so that we stand on the shoulders of hundreds of journalists who come before us. And so that's a terrific privilege and responsibility to have as well. And so that's where the answer to that question begins, right? With strong, sophisticated, unbiased reporting, the best that humans are capable of doing. And I say humans because this is an organization of human beings, which means we do make mistakes. But I think that's our reputation. And I also think that we have what I like to call a magic superpower, and that is the ability to convene people. Mm-hmm. And we can still convene people of all kinds and bring them together in all kinds of different conversations, from political debates. And we did 6 across the state of Tennessee the last few months in urban areas and rural areas. And we could call the candidates and they would come. We would say, "Candidate, be here on this time," and they would show up. But also we can convene other types of conversations. And one of the things that we've been very committed to since I've arrived is doing a much better job of not just writing about traditionally underrepresented communities, but writing for and with them. Mm-hmm. And so just last week, so we've launched a couple of initiatives a few years ago that have continued to grow, and one of them is called Black Tennessee Voices, and one of those is called Latino Tennessee Voices, where we're deliberately looking to magnify those voices in our communities. They've been traditionally underrepresented in our news pages, despite our legacy of covering civil rights, which we can be proud of. Only a couple years ago did the Tennessean staff actually reflect, in terms of its racial makeup and gender makeup, the community that we cover, which is typical of a lot of news organizations, unfortunately, which is not representing is. And so I think all of those things are ways that we can build that credibility and stand for the truth, which is ultimately what journalism is all about.
Yeah, I saw you wrote that column. You write a column, it looks like, occasionally, and you wrote one about the diversity. And it's interesting that I think you said in there that Gannett publishes its demographics of its newsroom, which I thought was really an interesting idea that we might.
Yeah. So when I came here, I mean, and you might recall this from my time in LA. I mean, when the 4 years that I was in Los Angeles, our diverse hiring was 58% at the Los Angeles News Group, and I'm very proud of that. But I feel like I also kind of left before the job was done, right? Because it takes a while to get to that point where you're representing your community. So that's a journey that we started when I came. We also started a diversity and inclusion task force, which has met without fail every month since January 2016. And we talk about all kinds of things. We do all kinds of things. A lot of our work has been inspired directly by that committee, but that committee's purpose is also to hold me and other leaders accountable as well. And really, I feel like in our industry, we do a good job of getting together in times of crisis, reacting to something, right? So when George Floyd happened, newsrooms across the nation were scrambling to have conversations, right? Which was good, but it's really hard to do something in a moment of crisis like that, right? When there's distrust has been built up in your newsroom. For us, we had been having conversations for 5 years already. And our Black Tennessee Voices initiative had already launched several months before. So, I wouldn't say that George Floyd didn't have any impact on us. It did. We listened, and it probably made us better. But we were already, working toward those. It's already part of our DNA. It's already one of the things I like to say is it already had become an involuntary muscle movement, like a heartbeat. It's just these things are just happening, and it's part of our culture and our DNA. And anyway, at that, Gannett has had a long history of being a diversity leader, going back decades. I mean, the very first female editors in chief were hired at Gannett, back in the 70s, when it was like unheard of to do that. And Maribel Wadsworth, made that commitment that, okay, we have this history, we need to reassert ourselves as the leader in this space. And the way we're going to do this is holding ourselves accountable through data, and not just say that we're committed to this. And well, I mean, we will say it, but we're going to demonstrate that we're living our values, not because we're telling you, but because we have this data to prove it. And it's hard. It's hard, especially hard in a transforming industry where you're, dealing with economic headwinds and all those other things that we have to deal with all the time.
Right. And I've seen, I know in my position that it's not like committing yourself to diversity is not just about checking off a box, and it actually improves news coverage. I mean,
Absolutely.
It really does. So I don't know. That's what I've seen, that even just the story selection improves.
Right. I mean, it's an economic imperative, right? So if you think about it from a business standpoint, it's not only the right thing to do, it's if you want to be in business in the future, you have to do it. And it improves everything that you do, because we all bring different backgrounds to what we do. I mean, I grew up on a farm, and in Northern California. I grew up around guns in a hunting family, right? Those two things right there are two things that not a whole lot of other journalists I've encountered have that background.
Right.
And that's just something that I bring to the newsroom that helps us maybe understand things with more nuance and sophistication. So multiply that by 100 people, right, in a newsroom, and you can see where you're bringing in all of these different life experiences, lived experiences that others don't have.
Right. We do have another question. It's kind of switching topics a bit, but definitely on theme. In your experience, do you believe journalism is still a growing field? How do you think it is changing and will continue to change in the future?
It's absolutely, definitely a growing field. And, take a look at any of the major job boards and see how many hundreds of vacancies there are. And that'll answer that question very quickly. So it's growing. The types of jobs are changing over time. Well, there are three parts of that question. What was it? I'm sorry.
Do you believe journalism is still a growing field, and how do you think it is changing and will continue to change in the future?
Yeah, so I think there's a number of ways that it's changing, but I think that having a thorough grounding and academic grounding, and then a professional grounding in audience science is a prerequisite for being a successful journalist. So, 30 years ago, you just worried about maybe your beat and writing a story. There aren't very many people running around like that today, I think. That you have to understand how you're going to connect that piece of journalism to an audience. And that matters because journalism that nobody reads or consumes doesn't really do much, right? I used to joke back when I was working in LA in the early 2000s. The Los Angeles Times used to publish its print circulation and its masthead every day, and it would change it daily. It would go up a little bit, it'd go down a little bit, so it'd be whatever 1,110,562. And we used to joke, of course, we worked at the rival organization, that every Times reporter was convinced that all 1,162,352 people read their story that day.
Right.
And back then, of course, we knew that wasn't true, and we know that editors knew through experience what stories were more likely to resonate with audience than not. And the stories they thought that would be on A1 of the print product, and ones that they didn't would be on page A22. But now we can measure those things very precisely, right? And how do we best spend our time? How do we best serve the community? What are the topics that folks are most interested in, and what are the topics that we can best bring our expertise to bear? And that's another part of our thought process that I think we think about a lot, is what that can we do that no one else can. So for us, and how journalism has changed, there's a lot less of this has happened type of writing to why did this happen? What ever happened? What does this mean moving ahead? And that takes critical thinking skills, where that liberal arts education is really important, so that you can produce the sophisticated type of reporting that will help explain those things. I think that also, besides having that being expertise in audience science, just having the mastery of all of the tools, right? So if you're a baseball player, you're a Major League Baseball player, right? Fielding ground balls, right? That's just, right? People aren't going to stand up and cheer for you for a routine ground ball. That's just what you do. That's what you're expected to do if you're a professional baseball player. So similarly, not only being able to write, but being able to do video, audio, being able to edit in those natively in those type of applications. Those are skills that I think people are pretty much expected to have out of school. If you don't, you can learn them on the job, but you're kind of at a handicap. And I get students, from the best journalism schools in the country, Northwestern and Missouri, and they have Columbia, they all have very high expertise in those things. And and they're not coming out saying, haha, you should hire me because I'm an expert with video. That's just catching a ground ball. They're an expert at doing journalism. They can work those tools at a high level.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest differences. You know, when I graduated from college, you wrote stories and that was it. That's all you did. You didn't have to worry about taking photos. And now, I mean, everyone's pretty much expected to know how to take a basic photo, do a basic reel for Instagram. I mean, you really have to know kind of what medium is going to work for what story you want to tell.
Well, and there are a lot of people, right? If our responsibility is the truth, and is to get that truth to the largest audience we can, there are a lot of people who don't consume the news through narrative storytelling. That's not their preferred method. And so you can do it in a big investigative story, and it can be, 10,000 words long. Some people will look at that. Most people won't.
Yep.
And those people who look at it tend to be a certain type of person. And going back to who we're writing for and with, that's not the way a lot of people in traditionally underserved communities want to conserve the news. So you easily can have, you're serving, honestly, over 50 white affluent audience. And I think our mission, I think we're called to serve a much broader swath of society than that. And so you mentioned reels. We had an Instagram reel the other day that had, as part of a pretty big story package that we did. And I think it was about 350,000 views. That reel alone led to 24 subscriptions to our product. And because that's the way that a lot of people want to consume news. And we provided it in that format that they prefer. I have a social strategist here who that is her job, not just reels, but that's a big part of her job. But making sure that we're connecting our journalism. And I think another big change that has happened is if you want to be successful, is we're not writing the story. We're not doing the traditional approach and saying, oh, what else can we do afterwards? The very beginning of the project, we are planning, we're brainstorming and planning. Okay, and what are we doing video/social media wise? What's our plan there? And so at the point of inception, because we know if we're planning things all at the same time, we're going to get better results. So we're having a project that we're publishing on Thanksgiving that we've been working on for several months on what's going on with African-American farmers in the South. There's some really fascinating storytelling that we're going to be doing, and we'll have a lot of great narrative stories. We've sent people all throughout the South, talking to people who farm the land for generations, but also a very interesting phenomenon of people who they come from a farming family, that's kind of their ancestors. The land is still in their family, but they've gone off. But they're returning to do that, and I'm really looking forward to that. But all of that stuff, all of the storytelling on various platforms was a big part of the planning for this project from the outset. So what are we doing on TikTok? What are we doing on IG? What are we doing on Facebook? And those are all not the same thing, right? So there's different types of approaches for all of that. What are we doing for native video? What are we doing for audio? So all of that is a part of our planning now.
It is reassuring because it's reassuring for me because I got into journalism because I love to write, but there still is a place for narrative storytelling.
There is, absolutely. And you and I both worked with a guy named Keith Sharon, who's, that's our big narrative storytelling gun. And he's involved in all of these things. And I think the power of narrative storytelling remains, but we just need to have our eyes wide open that that's not how everybody wants to consume the news. I like using the term storytelling when we talk about journalism, right? So what are we doing? We're telling stories focused on the truth. And there's a lot of ways to tell stories.
Right.
And narrative writing is one way, but there are others. And so we just have to have people who are experts in all of those ways and bring them together. And when we do bring them together, we can do really remarkable things.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell my students, like when you're in college, make sure you're reading, make sure you're consuming, make sure you're writing for maybe the campus newspaper if you have, if there's an opportunity there, try to do it. But also an interesting thing is we just hired a social media guy who doesn't have a journalism background, but he had a huge following on TikTok and Instagram. And so I always say that too, like if you can build a following, that's an attractive quality for a hiring manager in this field. I don't know if you would agree, because there is some training that has to take place.
I think it is. We've hired non-journalists before as well. I think the main, in my experience, the main challenge for them has been to learn and absorb our ethics.
Yes. Yes.
Because there are certain things, and every company, there's a generally accepted body of ethics for journalism,
Yes.
but then every company has their specific rules.
It
right?
shocks me how many people don't know that.
Yes. It is shocking, actually. And
I'm always surprised. Right.
Yeah. But for example, in my company, I'm not allowed to, and I wouldn't want to, I haven't been one for many, many years, but I'm not allowed to be a member of a political party. And that's a rule of our company. I would say that that's not necessarily a generally accepted guideline of all journalism. So there are a lot of companies that don't necessarily require that. So that would be a company specific rule.
Like you're not required to register or just not be part of either party?
I can't belong to either party.
Interesting.
So, in Tennessee, unlike California, which does not have open primaries, you have to either be a Republican or a Democrat to vote in the primary. That means that I can't vote in the primary.
Interesting.
Except on the nonpartisan issues. And that's a requirement for all of our senior leadership in our company. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think it makes it very clear. It makes it easier to, when you're maintaining a posture of being a nonpartisan, unbiased organization, that makes it easier.
Yeah, and so we're at 1:45. So, but I do want to ask you a question about that, just because I'm curious. It's been a struggle for us. It seems like it's harder to rein in the younger generation when it comes to expressing opinions on social media, and I have a hard time communicating why that's important. And that's another thing that people, I think, outside the industry don't quite get, why that's important.
Right. So I'm a member of Gannett's ethics committee. In fact, we have a meeting this week, and we're talking about that very subject, because there are a lot of employees that we have, younger employees who I'm kind of synthesizing their point of view, that they're not allowed to be their authentic selves.
Yes.
And that's wrong.
Yep.
And all I can say is I think when you become a journalist, you choose to give up certain things. And that's weighing in on partisan or political matters is one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that we've also grown, someone like me grew up in a time when there was no social media.
Yeah.
So we have to recognize that today's younger journalists have never known a world without it.
Right.
So it's harder. I think it's harder for them to envision that. But again, I think it comes if we want to. If I would say not we, if one wants to be part of an organization that stands for unbiased news, then that's the drill. That's what goes with it. That's what helps the brand that you're working for make that claim. But the other thing about today's journalism ecosystem is that there are journalism adjacent jobs where if you want to be part of a Republican or Democratic or a Black Lives Matter or whatever political cause it is, you can find a place there.
Yep.
You don't have to make that sacrifice, and that's that there's nothing wrong with those careers. They're just not journalism. There's something different.
Right. I think that has led to many spirited conversations in my classes with students about that. It's interesting to have that. To me, is a huge generational divide, because you're right. Like, we didn't grow up with social media, and that's a huge difference. But I am definitely in the old school, and I agree with you that if you want to be a journalist, this is one of the sacrifices you make. So,
Very good.
Any final closing thoughts? Any last advice for journalists? Or
a couple of things. I'll be brief. The first is my email address is Anastasi@Tennessean.com. So first initial, last name @Tennessean.com. So if anyone wants to ask a question of me personally, please feel free to reach out. I will always respond with enthusiasm to someone from Cal State Long Beach. I think 4 things I'm going to say real quick is I cannot overemphasize the importance of internships for students. A lot of students, and I think this is especially true at Long Beach, aren't necessarily aware of the critical importance of internships. The time to apply for internships is usually around December, and the internships are all decided in January or February. So please make that a part of your plan for the coming year. You might have to leave LA to get a good job. This is probably the most shocking thing that I've seen for a lot of students. And as much as it might seem like it, Los Angeles is not planet Earth. So there's a lot of other exciting things happening across the country. Be open to them. Service, I think all of us need to make that as a part of our personal ethos. So how are you serving others? I think that's really important. And it's important that we're doing it not just at our job. And then lastly, a lot of times people ask me, how do you win a Pulitzer Prize? And that's really through a pursuit of consistent excellence. And so I hope that becomes part of your personal ethos as well. And that one more thing, and that is, this is still a very honorable profession. I got into this business more than 30 years ago because I wanted to make a difference in the world. And I am as passionate about that mission today as I was then. and maybe even a little bit more so because I have a better idea of how to do it. So journalism needs you. It needs great people who are dedicated to the truth and helping make the world a better place.
I agree with that. Well, it was great to catch up with you, Michael. I'm so glad that they asked me to do this. Should I turn it over to the...
Yes, thank you so much, Melissa. I just want to say thank you both so much for being here today. That was a truly engaging chat. And usually now is the time when I ask our speaker, how can folks get in touch with you? But you guys already covered that, which was awesome. And Alana went ahead and put it in the chat for those of you here today live. Otherwise, we'll include that as well in our post. But thank you both so much for such an engaging chat. If Melissa, Michael, if you could stay back just while as folks filter out. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time today, and I hope you have a great day.